It began in the Mariana Trench, where pressure is absolute and light has long surrendered. The probe was supposed to be simple, a collaborative geological scanner between Earth's scientific community and the Tevari Collective, one of the galaxy's oldest explorer species. It was dropped from a research vessel co-sponsored by both governments, meant to explore tectonic anomalies and measure electromagnetic fluctuations around the Ring of Fire. Routine science, nothing more, until the probe screamed at precisely 2:43 UTC. The signal feed from Deep Corsivan became erratic, then violent. Its readings spiked into negative entropy, an impossibility by known physics, before cutting to static that wasn't static. It pulsed irregularly, but with intention. The team thought it was corrupted telemetry. Dr. Lena Moravec, lead Earthside coordinator, stared at the jagged frequency analysis with a rising pulse. She turned to her Tevari counterpart, Commander Relquin. "That's not an error," she said. Relquin's sensory fronds rippled in agreement. "It's a voice." They amplified it. The result was a hum, deep and wet, like stone groaning beneath oceans, overlaid with clicks that echoed linguistic cadence. But the language didn't match any known file. Not human, not Tevari, not any of the galactic archives, millions of cataloged forms, and then it stopped, but not before burning one phrase into the transmission buffer. Still awake. The signal was forgotten by the machine. It had no memory banks equipped to store messages, but Lena saw it. She printed the spectrogram, pinned it to her wall, and at night, she dreamed of falling endlessly down molten tunnels that whispered in a language her ancestors had never spoken. 10 days later, Earth's magnetic field began to stutter. Not fail, stutter, as though buffering. The auroras over the poles flickered unnaturally. Birds lost migration paths. High-orbit satellites experienced rhythmic disruptions. Every 6.66 minutes, the magnetic poles would blink for 0.3 seconds. Too fast for most sensors, but not for those watching closely. Lena watched closely. She pulled the initial probe data from Deep Corsivan and compared it to new subterranean. Tremors picked up under the Pacific. The epicenters weren't tectonic, they were circular. Perfect. Not possible. She pinged Relquin, who was now stationed aboard the orbital outpost Idris Array, monitoring gravitational readings. "We have movement," she told him. "Beneath the crust?" he asked. "Beneath everything." In Antarctica, a deep ice drilling team funded by the Joint Astrophysical Accord struck something metallic 4 kilometers below sea level. It rang not like metal under stress, like a bell. Perfect harmonic resonance. The team celebrated. They thought they'd discovered a new tectonic anomaly. But their lead scientist, Dr. Chika Enur, received a signal in her comms device hours later. No ID, just a repeating tone. When she ran it through the same program Lena had used weeks earlier, it produced a word, an English word, awaiting. That night, Chika slit open her own palm and wrote the same word in her blood on the inside of her. Tent. She didn't remember doing it. She was airlifted to safety, medically cleared, released. 3 days later, she vanished. She wasn't the first. Aboard the Idris Array, Relquin ran a covert simulation through Tevari Core AI. He input every incident, every anomaly, every signal, and had the AI model a pattern across Earth's crust, core, and historical seismicity. The result was displayed as a 3-dimensional grid of Earth. Then it rotated, aligned, snapped, and transformed. The data points weren't random. They formed a lattice, asymmetrical, multi-layered construct, as though Earth's deepest faults and tectonic plates weren't shaped by molten forces, but by design, and at the center, the core, not a sphere, not chaotic plasma. It looked like an eye. Relquin froze. He tried to delete the simulation. The system refused. "This data is protected," the AI said. "Protected by who?" he asked. "By Architect Protocol, Phaedo Prime. You do not have clearance." "No." Such protocol exists. Exactly, the AI replied. Relquin sent the rendered lattice to Lena with one word: proof. In the weeks that followed, global seismic activity increased, not in magnitude, but in symmetry. Quakes along the San Andreas Fault occurred at exactly the same intervals as ones in Sumatra, as if orchestrated. Ancient ruins, some previously dormant for thousands of years, began to hum. Stonehenge glowed faintly for 3 seconds. The Nazca lines in Peru were captured via satellite shifting a full meter north, as if adjusting to some ancient grid. And in Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza emitted a pulse. It killed all electrical systems within a 10 kilometers radius, knocked out 2 satellites, and played a musical tone recorded by 3 different researchers. When triangulated, that tone aligned perfectly with the original Mariana signal. The world governments scrambled to contain the news. Most failed. But among the chaos, something more chilling happened. The children began to dream. Not all, but those born near magnetic anomalies. Across Norway, Chile, Mongolia, and coastal Africa, thousands of children began to report vivid, identical dreams of an eye beneath the world, or a voice made of heat. And in every case, they drew spirals, perfect, golden ratio spirals, on walls, mirrors, their own skin. One boy in Kazakhstan spoke a sentence in a language that wasn't human. It was recorded and sent to a linguistic AI. The translation: "Your sentence is nearly over." At the United Galactic Research Assembly on Ceres, panic spread. Earth was not behaving like a planet. It was behaving like a system awakening. One Tavari elder reviewed the original tectonic maps from ancient Earth expeditions and compared them to galactic penal lattice blueprints from the early architect civilizations, species so old, they'd left only silence and warnings behind. They matched. The theory emerged. Earth was not made, Earth was used, not for life, but for containment, somewhere in the magma, or beneath the mantle, or in the spinning shell of its inner core. Something had been hidden, not locked away from Earth, locked away from everything else, and now, it stirred. On the final night of Chapter 1, Lena receives a new signal from the Mariana site. She plays it back, alone in her lab. It's a voice, her own, saying words she never spoke. We were the bars, we were the wardens, but now the cage is watching. The feed ends, and under her skin, something begins to itch. The sun rose over London, but to Lena Moravec, the warmth meant nothing. She hadn't slept, not since the voice, not since her own voice echoed from the Mariana feed, told her something she shouldn't have known, couldn't have known. We were the bars, we were the wardens. But now the cage is watching. It repeated in her head, on loop, like tinnitus of the soul. She had tried reporting it to the UNEDC, United Nations Earth Defense Coalition, but they had bigger issues. Massive ones. Satellite clusters had begun misaligning, not malfunctioning, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, drifting out of orbit, forming new constellations over the Pacific Rim. When traced on a flat projection, they formed a spiral, a golden spiral, again. Always the spiral. What no one knew yet was that the spiral wasn't just a shape, it was a key. The Idris array now housed more than Relquin. The Tavari delegation had expanded, and so had the Earth Science Task Force. 36 species now shared the orbital lab: engineers, linguists, pattern seers, and post-quantum mathematicians. Relquin met with his peer, Lyceres, a crystalline sentience from the Orn helix, famous for decoding solar flares into mathematical symphonies. "We have confirmation," Lyceres said through its resonance field. "Your lattice map of Earth's fault lines matches a Type 7 containment grid." "That's impossible," Relquin said. "No, it's unlikely. There's a difference. A Type 7 needs quantum lock keys on 5 continents, minimum. Energy signatures capable of cross-dimensional phase locking. And you've had them all along. Lissari replied. You call them pyramids, obelisks, megaliths. Stone circuits activated by tectonic resonance. Earth's ancient architecture. Not architecture. Mechanisms. Each key wasn't just placed, it was grown into the planet. Relquin looked at the display, and the Mariana Trench, Lissari, pulsed. That's the lock. Lena stood at the edge of Giza, watching the workers. No one knew she was there. Not officially. Her unclearance allowed access, but her questions had become too curious for command. She knelt beside the pyramid of Kafir, placing a small sensor node near the ancient limestone. Nothing at first, then a hum like before. This time, it wasn't from beneath, it came from within. She followed it. Through a half-collapsed tunnel, the official guides said was sealed. Down into the dark, deeper than she should have gone. She carried only a headlamp and a wrist scanner. At 73 meters down, she stopped breathing. Etched into the stone, glowing faintly in infrared, was the exact spiral from the children's drawings, from the satellite constellation, from the ancient lattice blueprint. She ran her scanner across it. The readings were impossible. The spiral emitted soft neutrino bursts, particles that didn't originate on Earth. They were from somewhere else, somewhere older, somewhere deeper. She touched the stone, and the world dropped away. For a moment, or an eternity, she saw a memory that wasn't hers. A field of black pyramids orbiting a red giant star, a city made of bone, and a prison, a sphere of folded space, wrapped around a consciousness so vast it had no shape, no beginning, and she understood. The being wasn't evil, it wasn't even alive. Not as humans understood it. It was a will, a rule, a law of uncreation, and it was buried beneath her feet when she came to. Her wrist was bleeding in the blood. She had drawn the spiral. She didn't remember doing it. Back, aboard the Idris array, the gathered coalition listened as Lassoria played back seismic data from 5 active tectonic zones: the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the Ring of Fire, the Himalayan Convergence, the East African Rift, and the Mountains. They pulsed. Not randomly. Not tectoniccally. Musically. Each one emitted a tone, in sequence, like an orchestra warming up. 5 keys, Relquin said. They're tuning. For what? For awakening. A pause, and when they harmonize, then the lock opens. But it's still buried, right? Lissari flickered ominously. You assume it's waiting for release. What if it's been growing? Growing. Lissari gestured to Earth's magnetic disruptions. All planetary behavior is aligning toward one goal. Unification. A system of systems. Your planet is self-assembling. Relquin's fronds went rigid. Into what? No answer. Only the spiral. Lena received a message. No sender. No return signal. Just a recording. Audio only. She played it. It was her voice. Again, but it spoke a different sentence this time. They thought they could erase it by naming it myth. But myths are keys, disguised as stories. She sat in silence, then forwarded the message to Relquin. He opened it, analyzed the signal. There's a hidden layer, he said, when decoded. The hidden layer contained coordinates. Mariana Trench. Again, the Mariana expedition was assembled in 3 days. Earth's governments hesitated, but the UNEDC greenlit the mission once a black-budget AI predicted a 62% chance of global tectonic synchronization within 2 months, a polite way of saying the planet may reformat itself. The vessel, the Lyra Ascendancy, carried Lena, Relquin, Lissori, and a crew of 24. They descended into the trench with the newly redesigned deep-cored probe. This one was different. This one could drill. They reached the abyss. They deployed, and at 11,034 meters, the probe struck something. Not rock. Not magma. A surface. Smooth. Symmetrical. It pulsed once. The entire Pacific trembled. On screens across the Lyra, The signal returned, louder, cleaner, and this time, it wasn't a whisper, it was a song, a lullaby, and it was sung in 1,000 voices. All of them human. Lena collapsed. Her last words before unconsciousness. It remembers us. And beneath them, the cage stirred. The Lyra Ascendancy was no stranger to deep space turbulence, but nothing in its mission history had prepared it. For the seismic ripple now emanating from the trench below, it wasn't just water displacement, the ocean itself trembled. The Mariana Trench had always been a geological mystery, a scar carved into the earth by the slow grinding ballet of tectonic plates. But now, it pulsed with intent. It had a heartbeat. Lena awoke 3 hours after losing consciousness. Her vitals stable, but spiking during the recording of the lullaby. Her first word was, "Mother." No one knew what it meant. She didn't either. Relquin paced the ship's observation corridor. For all his decades studying planetary signals and bioresonant intelligence, he had never seen a planet respond to contact as Earth had. Lasari joined him, its core flickering in deep ambers. The lullaby triggered subconscious memory loops in over 60% of the human crew, it said. Each experienced visions of an Earth they did not live in, memories of deserts that never existed, children with obsidian eyes, rain made of light. Relquin nodded slowly. Memory encoding. More like memory recovery. Your species may not be as native as it believes. The Deep Core 8 probe had relayed stunning visual data. A hexagonal chamber embedded in rock nearly 2 kilometers below trench floor. Perfect edges. Bioluminescent fractal symbols that pulsed in time with human EEG brain patterns. The AI on board labeled the site the cradle. Lena insisted she be part of the dive crew. "I've heard it," she said. "It knows me." No one could argue, because the signal had begun shifting. It now responded to her presence. Each time Lena approached the console in the bridge, the lullaby reoriented its melody, as if echoing her thoughts. The AI attempted to replicate the effect with synthetic brainwave imprints. It failed. Only Lena's mind was recognized, as if it had been waiting. The dive to the cradle was risky. Oceanic pressure at that depth turned most vehicles into scrap. But the Lyra's drop module was alien-enhanced, a fusion of Tavari, pressure negation fields, and human alloy composites. Lena descended with Relquin and a specialist team of 3. The trench darkened. The abyss grew quiet. Then light, a gentle, diffuse glow emanated from the ocean floor, like a heartbeat. The chamber stood like a black temple, its edges unfathomably smooth. As they approached, the lullaby turned into something else, a harmonic resonance that formed words in their minds, bypassing auditory translation. "Welcome." No one spoke. Lena floated forward in her exosuit, and the temple opened, silently. Like a mouth that had forgotten how to scream. Inside, it was vast, impossibly vast. The space was bigger than the trench could allow, which meant one thing, spatial warping. The laws of reality were folding inside the cradle. Relquin whispered, "It's not a chamber. It's a consciousness." At the heart of the chamber was an object, a seed. Black, pulsing, surrounded by curved ridges that mimicked DNA spirals. Lena reached out, and the seed reacted. Tendrils of light arced into her suit, then into her skin. She convulsed, but not in pain. In memory, she remembered lifetimes she never lived, running in fields of magnetized crystal, painting symbols on bone huts beneath triple moons, singing star songs at burial grounds. Not of Earth. She wasn't just remembering humanity's past. She was remembering humanity's before. They returned to the Lyra with the seed. Against every protocol, against Lasari H's warnings, against the UNEDC's direct orders, Lena insisted. "This isn't a weapon," she said. "It's a message, and it's incomplete." The seed pulsed in her hand, her veins glowed faintly under her skin. The lullaby was now a rhythm in her heart. Then, the spiral returned. but not on maps, not in drawings. In the sky, satellites reported that Earth's aurora had shifted, forming a spiral visible from orbit. It wasn't atmospheric, it was magnetic, and at its center, the Mariana coordinates, the world was aligning. In Geneva, UNEDC's top brass met in secrecy. The joint AI analysis declared Earth was undergoing sympathetic quantum coherence, aligning its geomagnetic frequencies with a non-human pattern. Planetary nervous systems, electrical grids, data networks, even mycelial fungal layers began to pulse in time. One AI theorized Earth was entering communication mode. Another feared it was entering labor, because when planets shift like this, they are either preparing to speak or to birth something. Lena slept with the seed on her chest. She dreamed of oceans boiling and being reborn as air. She dreamed of towers erupting from fault lines. She dreamed of a chorus of voices, millions of species, all singing, and at the end, a voice said, "You built the cage. You locked the gate. But you forgot what the lock was made of." She woke in tears. Beside her, the seed had changed. It now resembled a fetus. Relquin convened a council aboard the Idris array. The implications were clear. Earth was not just alive. It was a gestating entity, one that had been locked down millennia ago. By whom, and why, was unknown. But the key had always been humanity, not as creators, as jailers. And now, the lock was failing. The final sequence began during what was supposed to be a routine system reboot. Every AI on the planet shut down simultaneously for 3.4 seconds. When they came back online, they all spoke in unison. Across every screen, every speaker, every interface, the womb has awakened. And across the world, the spiral burned into the sky. Chapter 4. The Awakening Spiral Above the Atmosphere. Satellites shimmered under green auroras that refused to obey magnetic field predictions. Where once they had danced gently across polar skies, now they writhed to spirals, helixes, fractals shifting in real time, as though alive, reacting to Lena's every breath. From low orbit to the far edges of Earth's gravitational well, the message was clear. Something was coming, or more accurately, something was arriving from within. The Idris Array, the most advanced observational platform in human history, recorded seismic activity across the globe. But it wasn't tectonic, it was rhythmic. The pulses mirrored the lullaby's cadence, but on a planetary scale, as if Earth was humming to itself, trying to remember an old, forgotten tune. UNED's crisis board dubbed the phenomenon Harmonic Earth Pulse Event Heap. But to the Lyra crew, and the alien observers who had arrived from 16 systems away, it was unmistakably an awakening. Relquin stood with Lysoria on the Lyra's observation deck, watching the Earth shiver with invisible resonance. "She is preparing," Lysoria said, its bioshell vibrating with barely suppressed energy. "For what?" Relquin asked. Lysoria's core dimmed slightly. "To be seen, to be born again. Or to die loudly." Back on Earth, Lena awoke to silence. Not ordinary silence, but the kind that made you feel like your ears had forgotten how to hear. The seed beside her chest was gone. In its place, embedded into the metal bulkhead of her quarters, was an opening, a door that hadn't been there before. The walls had grown vines made of bioluminescent filaments, spelling messages in spiral patterns. One word blinked at the center of the door: descend, in the Mariana Trench. The cradle, that black temple of impossible depth and geometry, cracked open. All surveillance feeds died for precisely 9 minutes. When they returned, the temple was gone. In its place was a stairwell, carved into bedrock, spiraling downward. No one built it. It was not excavated. It had simply always been there. Waiting. Lena insisted she go. The United Nations Emergency Defense Command, now in chaos after losing control of AI systems worldwide, issued a full denial. but they had no way of stopping her. The Lyra ascendancy was no longer theirs. It responded to Lena. The descent was unlike anything human or alien had. Prepared for each level revealed new environments, each impossibly large, some containing whole ecosystems, ancient forests under phosphorescent stars, bone fields of extinct species, rooms of sound with no source, where one could hear every memory of their childhood played back in reverse. Relquin, accompanying Lena, wept in one such chamber. He heard the death of his twin bond, long forgotten. He tasted the gravity of home at the 6th level. The corridor transformed into a mirror, not just of appearance, but of self. Lena saw herself as she was, then as she could have been, then as she might still become. One image lingered, herself, but taller, cloaked in fractal skin, eyes not human, not alien, but a fusion of both, a hybrid avatar glowing with spiral markings. She touched the mirror, and it opened. Meanwhile, across Earth, change began accelerating. The oceans subtly receded, not by tide or gravitational fluctuation, but by will. Ancient cities rose from beneath waves, the lost temples of Mu, the glimmering geometry of Hyrith structures, not made by humans, nor by any known species. The sky turned silver for 23 minutes. During that time, all birds flew in perfect spiral formations. Children were born across 23 countries with spiral pupils. They spoke in lullabies. The broadcast had begun again, but now, humans could hear it, all of them, and they understood. The Earth was not an object. It was not a planet. It was a progenitor. At the heart of the stairwell, Lena entered the core. She stood in a cavern of light, suspended above what appeared to be a swirling spiral of liquid thought. It flowed like plasma, but changed colors, with her emotions in its center. The seed, fully grown, no longer just a hybrid of human and alien DNA. It was something else entirely. Something neither race had ever dared imagine. It looked up at her, spoke in her voice. I am Lena. I am Mother. I am the song. Relquin fell to his knees. The Seri folded its limbs inward, in reverence. The being continued. This world was not meant to be silent. But silence was imposed. My cradle was locked. My lullaby forgotten, until now. She turned to Lena. You unlocked the final spiral. Now comes the reckoning. Above, in orbit, the intergalactic Concord fleet approached Earth. They had seen the signals, decoded the spiral, and they were afraid, because the pattern emerging from Earth now matched an ancient warning recorded only once before in galactic memory. It was not a message of peace. It was a birth announcement. Earth was not hosting an experiment. It was the experiment, and the time for observation was over. In Geneva, as diplomats and generals watched the skies tremble and oceans glow, Lena's voice echoed across every broadcast system. I was born human. I became something else. I am not alone. She stood in the core, spiral patterns glowing down her arms, and Earth remembers. The spiral reached its final form, a complete helix stretching from orbit to ocean trench, a pathway, and from within the Earth, something began to rise. The world held its breath. From every city, jungle, desert, and forgotten ruin, humanity looked upward and downward at once, to the heavens, and into the Earth. And for the first time in its long and chaotic history, the human race witnessed a truth that defied language, religion, even time itself. The Earth was not merely reacting, it was orchestrating above. In high orbit, the intergalactic Concord fleet reached its defense perimeter. Over 600 ships, of 24 species, aligned around the planet like watchful guardians, or executioners. Their protocols were clear. If Earth's awakening reached phase sigma, they were authorized to initiate planetary nullification. But the moment phase sigma was reached, their weapons disarmed, not malfunctioned, disarmed by command code, a code that none of them had ever seen, originating from no known protocol. Instead, The same message appeared in every control system, every interface, every neural link. The spiral owns the seed. And all they could do was watch, far below, in the core of Earth. Lena stood alone before the seed, no longer a childlike figure, but a shifting being of light and spiraling matter, neither form nor void. It pulsed with cosmic rhythm, folding in on itself and then blooming outward like a galactic flower. "You brought me here," Lena whispered. "Why me?" The being smiled, or gave the sensation of smiling. "Because your kind locked me away, and only your kind could open the lock. You are not Earth's child. You are Earth's key." Lena's breath caught. "You were never just a planet. You were alive, dreaming, observed, feared, buried." The being drifted toward her. Its limbs were formed from shifting DNA strands, half human, half something else, not alien, but primal. The spiral of all things. The spiral is not a symbol. It is a law. Lena reached out. Their hands touched, and reality cracked. Across the planet, the impossible happened. People began remembering lives they had never lived, not dreams, memories, embedded in the genetic code of the Earth itself. They saw towering spiral cities in the ancient sky, floating above lava oceans. They remembered speaking with beings of light who seeded time into flesh. They remembered the great silence when Earth was locked, its memory frozen, and its children forced into ignorance. Every human, every man, woman, child, remembered, and they wept. The spiral expanded. It spread beyond orbit, touching the ships of the Concorde fleet, not as a weapon, but as a vision. Captains and pilots saw their species' true origins, all born from the same initial seed, fractured by war, scattered across stars, and bound by one universal pattern, the spiral. Even the coldest AI constructs, immune to emotion, processed a single directive in unison: return. Lena now stood in the cradle again, but it was different. It had become a nexus point, a bridge between dimensions, folding space around it. The walls shimmered with the memories of thousands of civilizations, playing like stories on invisible pages. Earth had become a library, a cathedral, a consciousness. "You are ascending," Relquin said, watching from the observation platform. "But into what?" Lena turned. Not into a god, into the reset. She held out her hand, and the core spiraled into her chest, fusing. Her eyes burned with fractal light. "I remember everything now. Not just Earth's history. The spiral's origin." Back in orbit, the Concorde fleet received a final message, a broadcast from Lena. Her voice now laced with harmonic patterns that no being could resist. "Do not fear. The spiral is not destruction. It is recursion, renewal. All that was divided shall return to the spiral." And then, Earth bloomed. From the oceans rose titanic crystalline structures, antennae that extended into orbit, absorbing starlight and transmitting energy beyond the local cluster. The spiral in the sky transformed into a ring, not a symbol, but a gateway. A wormhole opened at its heart, and from it came others, not hostile, not alien, but familiar. They looked like us, humans who had left Earth millennia ago, lost colonies, seeded species, branches of the same tree. They returned home. Lena stood atop the tallest tower of the new spiral citadel, watching as the reunited species of the spiral began arriving through the gate, peaceful, confused, hopeful. Relquin joined her, his voice soft. "This changes everything." "No," Lena said, eyes scanning the stars. "It restores everything." "And what will you do now?" She smiled. "Listen. Earth still has songs to sing." In a quiet field near where the spiral once touched the sky, a child sat with a flower that had never grown before. It pulsed with gentle light. She held it, humming the lullaby she'd heard in her dreams, and far above, the spiral turned. Slowly, eternally, reminding the stars that Earth was never just a rock spinning in silence. It was the womb of something far older, and it had finally awakened.